welcome to another episode of the AI Innovators Podcast by Salad Technologies. Today, we have with us Petros Syntelis. Petros is a principal data scientist with Virgin Media O2, and Petros is joining us from London today. Petros, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Prashanth. Very happy and glad to be here, and I'm quite looking forward for our conversation.
Likewise. Can you give us a little background about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a principal data scientist at Virgin Media O2. Virgin Media O2 is a telecommunications company in the UK, one of the biggest one, if people don't know about them. And basically, my role is to be a technical lead across different teams and verticals, and deep dive on difficult solutions, and typically try to figure out solutions in open-ended areas where it's the problem statement is difficult to be defined. My background before I joined Virgin Media was not in the industry. I was an academic. I was a lecturer and postdoc researcher at solar physics. So it was quite a transition from one to the other.
Yeah, I know a little bit about the transition. Although mine is not as cool as yours. I used to be an aerospace engineer, and then
Awesome.
now I work in startup marketing. But yours is a lot cooler, going from astrophysics. Can you share a little bit about that journey, right? Like being an astrophysicist and then going from there to become a data scientist. Because one of the things that we see today is this mass. I would almost say psychosis, but also there's a lot of truth in it. In that people think AI is going to take over all of the jobs. So there's a lot of people who are trying to upskill, who are trying to switch careers and get themselves trained to be data scientists, get themselves trained to be machine learning engineers. And you're someone who's actually successfully done that. And not even, in the last year or so, you've done it a few years ago. So what made you do the transition and what made you give up astrophysics?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a very good remark that it was pre-GPT. It was before the extra hype. It was with the regular hype around machine learning and AI. So, yeah, so I was basically in academia doing my PhD for like 3 years, 4 years, how long was it? Was very close to data. Astrophysics is a very data-driven field. So I was doing imaging data analysis, spectral analysis, time series analysis, and some numerical simulation. And then in my research as a postdoc, I was mainly focusing on doing numerical simulations, large scale in supercomputers, parallelizing codes, and doing theoretical models with like pen and paper equations. So lots of the stuff that you need in order to do data science, it's there, like data analysis and all the numerics in essence. Now, obviously, one to the other is quite different. So you don't just live to go there without thinking about it. So my personal journey was that I did really enjoy the research and the collaboration in academia and speaking to people at like very high level. But there were always also things that I didn't quite enjoy in academia. So anyone who has done a PhD or they've been through research, they know that the career progress is slow. Career stability is non-existent for a lot of years, which then trickles into your personal life because you can't have like an established personal life whilst having an academic career. You have to be very driven on that. And that was like over the years posing some difficulties to me. And I was thinking about the pros and cons, listening obviously to the hype around machine learning, not GPT level hype, but lots of hype. And I decided that it's a field that had all the good stuff that I liked from academia, learning a lot of new things, innovative technologies, fast pace, and all these sort of things, with potentially not having the drawbacks of having to sacrifice some stuff from my personal life to get a career in the field. So I decided to basically leave my academic career and switch into the machine learning space. And the way I did it was, I think, the usual, self-study route, some Andrew New courses, Coursera, and then you do some projects. And then for me, I joined the bootcamp offered by faculty. It's a company that does sort of things in the UK. And through that, I landed a job in Virgin Media, where I've been a data scientist for the last 4 years.
Wow, that is quite the journey. And if anyone is listening in from academia, when we eventually publish the podcast, I think a lot of people would be very interested, at least now that post GPT, with the hype of everyone trying to get into data science. The fact that there are people like you who actually done it, and you're also talking about a concrete way to do it, right? Like Coursera, you talked about boot camps, and so there's a path to do that, and the fact that you can actually land a job at a reputable company like Virgin Media and working on really cool things as data scientists. That I think that's going to give inspiration to a lot of people who are looking to switch careers. Yeah. So you mentioned that you work on projects that need a little bit of extra attention. You work on projects that are a little bit harder to solve. So almost it sort of sounds like you're part of a SWAT team where you just come in and look at the landscape and go, okay, these are the hard problems to solve. Does that then require a wide, does that then require a team with a wide variety of backgrounds, people, data scientists with wide variety of backgrounds, or are the underlying principles the same and all you need is a few good data scientists? So it doesn't matter if you're tracking the problem with computer vision, if you're tracking the problem with transcription, it's easy to pick up and apply the principles.
No, that's a very interesting question. So the way we structured the data science team in Virgin Media, and it's quite a large data science team. I think we are 50 data scientists and machine learning engineers. So there's a lot of people. It's basically in different verticals that are associated with the organization. So we have squads that typically are focused on specific projects or specific big areas of the company. For example, you might have a squad for pricing or personalization or operations in a sense. In my journey in Virgin Media, I've been through working at different squads to develop specific products, data products, I mean. I've been a manager for a year, managing like multiple squads, and now as a principal, I'm working across squads. So I've been like a jack of all trades, where I'm being placed in areas where either there is a need to develop something that is a bit more advanced, and they need somebody who is like more experienced to put everything together, or there is a need to have a fast and very critical execution that needs to be done, or more frequently enter a space that there is value, but we don't quite know where that value is and what to do. So like I work with the squads, I work with the teams, as you said, and I'm trying to break down the open-ended questions in a way that they create a process that can be then handed over to the squads and the teams to build models, data products, and solutions over the time. And then if needed, I can advise and help. So I can build POCs, I can build like the original systems, and then hand over to the squads to deliver the products.
Nice. I'm glad I asked the question because oftentimes we don't really get insight into how teams are structured. Data science and machine learning gets a lot of media coverage these days, but at least personally, I very rarely see anything where they talk about how actually to structure your teams. What's the best way to bring in people from different backgrounds and solve these problems. Now, talking about problems, Virgin Media is obviously a consumer company. And so where does data science come in to help with the innovation and customer experience? What are a couple areas where we don't even realize as an end user that data science is something that's helping us?
Yeah, absolutely. I will answer that, but before that, I want to say that I totally agree with your point about teams. And what people don't realize a lot when they just focus on the hype is the importance of teams. Like the team makes the product, the team makes the success, and the team structure and the company backing around initiatives and so on is the biggest and most critical thing that you need to have in place if you need to have some successful products. And that stands for everything, but for machine learning and the hype around it. But many companies that now enter the journey of digital transformation and then I want to adopt machine learning technologies is that it's even more critical to structure the teams correctly and have the correct organizational support to make these success stories and not just something where we shoveled money, it didn't work, and then we hired contractors to build something that's not working exactly as we would like. And anyhow, this is how it is. Right? It's a big differentiator. So to your question, Virgin Media and like machine learning, like the company, like the data science teams are split into three roughly verticals, and they kind of match what you expect from a telecoms provider. So you have stuff around personalization and pricing, like commercially driven data science, where your models can advise which offers you should make to your customers. That helps you like to convert customers and upsell products and so on and so forth. So traditional commercial machine learning. You have another vertical that is around operations, which means call centers by phone or call centers by messaging channels, in essence. And around this space, you can have also fraud-related, credit risk-related things in some sense. And there is another area where you have the network. We are a telecoms company. We do have a network, and Virgin Media owns its own network. So the network is a thing where data science advises a lot of, like, big part of that team advises on how to develop the network. So where do you expand your cables? Where are you going to place your cables next? Or now that we merge with O2 and we also have mobile coverage, where do you place the towers for your mobile network in order to improve commercial initiatives and signal and so on and so forth? And also within that space, you might have like things like real-time diagnostics of the network and sort of things that are useful for the customer, because as a customer, you might have, you experience the end product that comes to your house, and you only care to talk to your provider if it's expensive or if your network is bad, in essence.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Cool. A lot of interesting applications. I kind of had a sense for the first two. No, I think I only had a sense for the call center one because we do transcription here at Salad as well. But pricing, I didn't realize how big data science played a role in coming up with pricing offerings. And also, just the location positioning of the cables and towers. That's another area where, right, I didn't really connect the dots before. Talking about the call center, right? Like that's how your work came up on my radar is through the paper where you had co-authored and you had talked about doing transcription with open source models and doing it in-house instead of relying on hyperscaler provided APIs like the Google speech to text, or I think the other one that you had mentioned in the article was AWS. Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about like what motivated the shift from going from APIs to a self-hosted solution, especially how much of a lift was it to sell the idea at an enterprise company like Virgin, right? Like if it's a startup, I totally understand, people can just make the shift easily, but to do that at an organizational level, how much of a shift was that and challenge was that?
I think it wasn't that difficult because it wasn't a shift. There wasn't any call transcription service in media. So, we had the business requirement in essence. Uh, uh, and there was a huge need for analytics because Virgin Media is in the process of improving the call center significantly and changing providers, merging the services together and trying to up the level, the game of customer experience and service. And for that, you need a lot of analytics that are describing what your customer needs are. And the best possible source for all this sort of stuff is the direct interactions that you have with your customers through the call center. Obviously, you need other stuff as well, but this is like one of the core needs. So we were helping develop these areas of the call center. And to do that, we needed to have text. And for that, there was discussion that we need to have this amount of transcriptions in order to do these analytics. Our team, machine learning, to do NLP and so on, the analyst to do analysis of the queues and volumes and so on and so forth. So I was tasked to have a look at it and see what we can do. So we had audio files somewhere. I got a sample of this and I looked at different, transcription services that were immediate to me. Like we use GCP and AWS. So I looked at the pricing and I was uh, surprised by how much it would cost to transcribe audio files at the volumes that we have as a business. And that's an important one for the audience because uh, not everyone has as much volume as we have. Like the cost, it depends on, it charges by the hour, by the minute. So if your job is to transcribe something small, maybe the cost is okay. But for us, per month, you have something like 20 million hours of audio. So that's a lot. That's a lot of audio, which means if you use GCP or AWS, that is 200,000 per month for transcription costs. Obviously, like 2 million per year is not a budget that anybody will approve if you want to do analytics and support the business, right? Nobody wants that. So there was a discussion about what to do that. You can sample audio and only transcribe something that is, good enough as quantity, or you can start using a bit more machine learning and data science. So I did a model, a POC, on how we could use Whisper to transcribe the audio ourselves. I put the numbers down. The cost was like significantly lower. It depends on the volume when you compare it with the providers, but it ranges from 20 times cheaper up to 100 times cheaper, depends on how much audio you will transcribe. So order of magnitude difference or orders of magnitude. And not only that, the output was kind of better. So because we had these long audio files, your conversation on the phone could last on 5 minutes or 10 minutes on average. I think it's 15 minutes or something, up to an hour and a half. And these long audio files are quite tricky to transcribe. And the GCP provided models were failing to transcribe some of the big audio files. You got some big blanks of text in the middle of the long conversation, which I wouldn't get with Whisper. So lots of pros. And we discussed to basically give it a go, try to build something that will scale and see how it will play out with the cost once we scale the solution. And it went very well. Like cost-wise, I tell the numbers, it's mind-blowing, the difference.
Yeah, it's that's the surprising thing, that how much the market APIs are charging today, whether it's transcription or voice, image, no matter what it takes. We're at Salad, we're new to the business and new to the market. Our strength is building distributed networks and distributed clouds. So even we had the same sort of reaction that you did, which was uh, we wanted to do benchmarks of popular models, obviously. So we went with Stable Diffusion and then Whisper. And then when we did the benchmarks, I still remember the internal Slack channel where our solutions analysts have come in and post the numbers. And we're just looking at it going, that doesn't sound right. It cannot be 96% cheaper than what's out there on the market that thousands of teams are using. This is absolutely mental that companies are charging, that companies are overcharging, and also a lot of corporations are overpaying for transcription. So it's nice to see that there are the first your first step wasn't just to go, okay, what's the solution that I can get off the shelf, but sort of do that due diligent analysis of, okay, but is this really what we have to pay? But again, especially as these models come on and as more and more APIs come on for different models, I think that has to be top of the mind for a lot of the audiences. Is that cost analysis. We do get a few call centers that actually use the Salad transcription API as well. And when they come in, that's the first thing that attracts them also is we can be cheaper because we're distributed cloud. So we don't have high-end GPUs and we don't have to maintain the data centers. So I think all of that cost is built into the API cost of the larger providers. So the two options, yeah, are the one that you mentioned, which is just, self-host Whisper for transcriptions, or just, look for alternative clouds. Try to run on lower end GPUs as much as you can. That's another thing that also that we see very prevalent is a lot of APIs are powered by the H100s and A100s, and they bundle up the cost, even though it could very well run on the RTX, GTX GPUs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like going back to the original argument about the hype. Okay, you don't need to have Gemini to transcribe your audio just because it's multimodal. Like, it's gonna be super expensive. You don't need to do everything with the fancy models. And actually, APIs are extremely powerful because they democratize the use of AI to a lot of people who are not familiar with these technologies. And there is a big barrier of knowledge to know how to use the GPUs, know what distributed cloud and computing means, use these models correctly, tune them correctly, fine tune them if need them correctly. All these things are different levels of complications that you need to consider in all this discussion, because not all teams have this, but they overcharge. Like, it's ridiculous. And a factor of 100x is surreal. And I'm talking about a model where we transcribe the audio 2 times, because we had like 2 channels, left and right, and left is the customer, right is the agent. So basically, we do 2 transcriptions, and it's still that much cheaper than what they offered. It's it's
Yeah,
extreme.
it is shocking doing the cost benefit analysis and seeing companies just pay. We get inbound leads sometimes that will come in and say that pricing cannot be right, right? Because it's a complete shift to the market, and I think that's also something that we're going to see going forward with a lot of these overpriced APIs. Because obviously they have a role. A lot of teams don't have the infrastructure or the kind of team strength that you have to actually go in and implement. In which case, yeah, it makes sense. But yeah, I think we're slowly getting to the point where cost is becoming a huge positive factor, and a lot of the teams are going to start looking at alternative ways of self-hosting or doing a mix of self-hosting and APIs.
Absolutely. And on that point, on the cost effectiveness part of the conversation, I think from the business perspective, it's important to keep in mind for everyone that yes, you can do something cheaper, but there might be a case where you don't have to do what we did and build your in-house solution. Maybe like the API is like a correct way to do it, expensive or cheaper, depending on what your budget is and how familiar you are with things and maybe generic package offerings you have with specific providers and so on, depending on your product you're building, right? Because it's important to remember that, for example, Virgin Media is not in the business of uh, call transcriptions or speech to text AI. We're not an AI business, we're a telco provider. And the business product that we want to build is analytics for the customer. But we had a barrier. We can't pay that much money to get that thing. So you need to do what we did. And now, another company might have a little bit of audio, which can be transcribed through APIs quite quickly and quite fast. And there you say, okay, I have a budget of a few thousand per month. I'm okay spending it because that unlocks a lot of money out of my product. I can get
Yeah,
hundreds of thousands or millions out of the product feature I develop with that cost. And reducing that cost because it's low already is not warranting the amount of effort, engineering effort, and data science effort you need to put there in order to do that, when you can place the same talent somewhere else and develop another product feature that could develop like hundreds of thousands or millions in revenue through AI. So all of these things are important to keep in mind. And APIs are useful, but they can be cheaper, as your API is.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the other shift also is for the market. The market needs to have a sort of a come to Jesus moment and think about why the APIs are that expensive, and switch to, well, the same APIs can be powered by lower end GPUs as well, and lower end GPUs, consumer GPUs, for example. Like you mentioned, you don't always need the best model out there. You don't always need the highest high end GPUs, and it's a balancing act that I think more companies are starting to do now that there's a lot more offering. There's a lot more neo clouds out there. There are a lot of lower end APIs that are coming out. So yeah, I think it's good for the market as a whole in terms of larger scale adoption of AI, and that's going to power a lot of that. Now, switching tracks. deploying Whisper on your own. What kind of challenges or technical challenges that you faced deploying an open source model at that scale?
Well, to be honest, Prashanth, the biggest challenge of this whole enterprise was getting the audio files from the on-prem servers to GCP. This is like industry in a nutshell. Like
Hmm.
everyone who has worked in a big company knows what I'm talking about. Like we had to jump through hoops for months to manage to get the audio files from the server of the company that manages the calls to on-prem, and then to persuade the people to add additional storage to the on-prem servers in order to enable us to copy the files over to GCP, obviously with security and all the stuff, with very personal data and so on and so forth. But this copying of files, months. Like the same amount of time it took us to build the algorithm that will transcribe the audio files, merge all the text together in something that has a flow, and write the productionization code to scale the damn thing. The same amount of time was put into copying the files from one place to the other.
I think somewhere there's a market for a startup that can come in and do just that.
Engineering challenge wasn't that great. I think that because we're not looking at a model that is of the size of the biggest llama models that require very expensive infrastructure to spin up, that costs a lot of money, and be very careful how you do it. You can like spin up regular virtual machines with a reasonable amount of RAM, and then the whole process is how efficiently you can parallelize all these things in order to process, to use your GPU as much as possible. And these are some complications, especially if you do like APIs and you streaming data, that you need to make sure that you have enough like resources available to do all this stuff. But for us, doing batch transcription of a lot of audio in practice helped us, because the I/O of the whole like distributed thing was quite low, and the long audio files we have, which are like tens of minutes and hours, meant that we managed to utilize our GPUs for the biggest part of our time. So it was easier than we initially thought, to be honest.
Nice, nice. Now, was the infrastructure, your GPU infrastructure in-house? And then you mentioned batch transcription, right? Like, so essentially, this is all using Whisper to summarize, to transcribe a call, and then summarize, gain insights, and then feed that back into the system for your calls and teams to act on it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the transcription is basically a service that takes audio files and metadata and all the stuff about the call center and produces the text. And we want the text to be a conversation between an agent and a customer. So for anyone who has used Whisper, if you throw Whisper, it gives you a fantastic continuous text, but it doesn't diarize the conversation into the speaker. So we wanted that element in order to be able to drive analytics about what the customer had and what the agent did and so on and so forth. So we need to add this component on top of Whisper, and then scale it to work. The summarization of text and what we do with text classifications, LLM stuff, and all the other things are other machine learning systems or other data products we build on top of the transcriptions we produce from this pipeline.
Got it, got it. Now, was this all the infrastructure for to power all of this? Did you do it? Was the infrastructure in-house, or were you still using infrastructure from external
It's
hardware vendors?
GCP. We use GCP for all the cloud infrastructure.
What sort of GPUs? What sort of GPUs were you running this on?
T4s, I think.
T4s. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Got it.
the cheapest that Google offers. I think it's T4.
That's interesting. This is you're pretty much giving a blueprint for a lot of companies, I think, out there that also want to save costs and just start going on the path of self-hosting their own transcription models. Now, in terms of what advice would you give to other teams that are looking to evaluate an open source solution and whether it's right for their case, right? Like self-hosted open source. Are there any sort of breadcrumbs that teams have to look for when they have to evaluate, right, like open source solutions that are self-hosted?
By evaluation, you mean whether it's worth actually building the
Yeah,
system?
yeah, whether it's worth actually building the system. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it goes back to cost for me.
Hmm.
Like it goes back to cost and the product. So one thing that a lot of machine learning and data science teams, at the core of the science team, is that we all want to do the fancy stuff, right? So you don't care about the big picture, what the business wants to do. You want to focus on your little like machine learning bubble and enjoy in a self-contained manner the latest technological advancements. I fully sympathize with that, and I love it. But in practice, when you are asked to do these sort of things, either it's speech to text or now where the hub is like LLMs, it might be hosting your own LLM or whatever. You need to like put it in the context of why are you doing that, right? You do that for a reason. And if you are not a business that sells call transcription as a service, or if you are not a company that builds innovative algorithms to sell these services, then probably you do that to serve another product, which is the thing that your company sells. So does it matter? Does this algorithm help your product? Do you get cost benefits by using these things? If yes, and you have the time and talent to invest, then it's worth doing it because it's well justified. But it might not be the case. It might be, as we said before, a waste of time. Like if you have only a little bit of audio and you don't care about a bill of £1,000 per month, that might be your little bit of audio that you transcribe. Yeah, why bother if you have the money? Uh, if you don't have the time to do that feature and you can shovel a few tens of thousands into this feature in order to build the feature, and the feature, like when you build software, is not the end of the system. Like you switch to text is something here around something bigger, has software integration, blah, 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 blah. So what the business wants to do is build the whole thing. So if you don't have the time, spend your time to build the whole thing. And when you find the time and you can reasonably argue that I will make a big benefit by switching to an in-house model, pull the plug from the API and plug your own solution over there to reduce costs.
Makes sense. One last question was switching lanes. In terms of data science, what emerging trends do you see as a data scientist that excite you the most?
Emerging trends that excite me the most.
If there's
I
any.
mean,
If not, you can also answer, what is a controversial opinion that you have in data
I,
science, right?
I'm very excited about AI agents. I don't know where it's gonna go, but obviously, okay, I'm a victim of the hype. I can apologies, but yeah, it's like very exciting to see the progress in the space where AI systems can manage eh, an ecosystem of different bots in order to get to complex answers by themselves. And I'm very, very, very curious to see how it's going to play out and which use cases actually produce business value by doing that, which is obviously the biggest question in the market at the moment when it comes to machine learning. So that's one is for me the most exciting trend. The controversial opinion you asked.
Yeah. Do you have any controversial opinion about, an opinion that's very left field in data
Ah,
science? And
I do have one that contradicts exactly my previous point. So everybody like raving about Gen AI and all of these things, AI agents and how they will revolutionize everything and bring trillions of value in the market in the next 10 years. I have like a feeling that in the next I don't know 5 or 10 years, the overall impact of XGBoost in business is gonna make more money than everything LLM is going to add. So yeah, lots of hype, but the true money in most businesses is to do simple predictive stuff with algorithms that are not that large scale or fancy.
I like it. I like it. Okay.
True.
One final question was in this sort of a personal question. I like to, at Salad, so we've built, right, it's a distributed cloud, so like Airbnb for GPUs. Our big vision was, folding at home, uh, starting from there and kind of build an army of consumer GPUs around the world that can power, you know, AI, machine learning, and other production use cases. Well, what do you have any thoughts on? like the model of a distributed computing cloud, and as an enterprise user, right? Like as an enterprise user, how would you evaluate a solution like Salad Cloud?
I love it. I love it because it's cheap at the end of the day. Right? The thing that matters is the cost, and the more people get into the AI business, the more people will need GPUs. Doesn't matter if the ecosystem of the big models increases, allowing software engineers to ping APIs and remove the data scientists from that space. The complexity of all that stuff that require eventually the machine learning engineers and the data scientists and so on will shift somewhere else because you might plug one hole, but there will be a need to do something cheaper, more efficiently, more in-house, and so on. So I think that the ecosystem will work like that for a foreseeable future. And it's not going to die in the next 5 years. Data scientists and machine learning engineers will be around for the next 10 years, I think, building this sort of system, at the very least. So the more, the models become bigger, and the text models will be big in some sense, like audio systems will be big, visual systems will be big by definition because they are complex models. The more you will need to be able to do stuff with these models. And you can't reasonably use GCPs or AWS's offerings if you are a small company. Like for startups, if you want to offer a product that is a fine-tuned model on something or your new version of an approach based on the latest research, you cannot afford doing the job if you don't have like cheap access to GPUs. So I think it's a life-saving enterprise for anyone who wants to innovate in machine learning. Now, enterprise is different because like big companies will get big contracts with the big providers. They want the security. They want the whole package. They want to have a nice integration with, the databases, the data lakes, so on. Like it's a whole ecosystem of things that you get when you go to a cloud provider that covers every aspect of your data processes, from dashboards, from DevOps, from data engineering to ML and so on. And this is quite convenient if you are a big company because it standardizes things. And most of the times, this sort of, once you cross the threshold and you are there, the cost of this service is something that I don't think you care that much because it's easier than managing other stuff. And many times, like for these companies that are going through the digital transformation now, and they have shifted from on-prem things to the enterprise solutions, they have already made a commitment for the next 30 years. Like they're not going to switch from GCP to something to AWS if they have selected GCP and vice versa. It's not going to be that easy. Lots of infrastructure is built in one place. So they will stay there. And they will only select a more cost-efficient provider if they have specific use cases that significantly reduce the cost. So if they start, for example, training their own LLMs to do things and so on, maybe it will get to a point where, I don't want to spend X millions to GCP when I can spend a tenth of that cost using a different provider. Balancing again the convenience and everything else and any politics around these decisions. So enterprise is a bit more complex.
Yeah, we've seen that. Like you mentioned, right? Like oftentimes we'll start with a smaller use case here. So yeah, that's usually how we've seen enterprises engage. But yeah, startups obviously, yeah, like you mentioned, once the credits run out with the larger compute providers, that's when they start looking at alternative clouds. Okay, yeah, I think that was my last question. This has been a fantastic conversation, Petros. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Prashanth, for having me. I love the conversation, and yeah, thanks again.